Hello and welcome to another episode of the Drum Corps Coffee Shop podcast. My name is Rob, and today I'm flying solo. Unfortunately, my co-host George couldn't make it today due to some prior commitments. But today, I am lucky enough to have more than just one guest. I actually have two guests. They are both here from the California area, and they are both brothers. And these guys are really close to me as I consider them somewhat like family, just knowing them the few years that I have in the activity. And I jokingly call them my cousins from Bakersfield. So without further ado, I bring on Efren and Daniel Gutierrez. How you guys?
Hello.
How you guys doing, man?
All good. I'm gonna just get a quick correction in there. It's Efren, long E.
Efren, man, you got to put like
That's all
a
good.
you got to put like a line over that E. So I've been mispronouncing it all these years.
It's
So
all good,
we are
man. It's probably best I put it on the record since it gets mispronounced all the places.
so
Um,
to correct then, I'm here with Efren, and is it Daniel or Daniel Gutierrez?
Either of the two works.
So, both of these gentlemen here, they come from California, and for those who don't know the California area too well, it's pretty much broken down. The easiest way to describe it is it's broken down into like three main areas with sub areas. So you have up north, which Northern California, or what some of us here in California call it NorCal, and that consists of like the Bay Area is like a sub area of that, and then you have Southern Cal, which is like LA South, and then you have like the Central Valley, which is where Efren and Daniel are from, the Central Valley region of California, and it's really the South Central Valley, which is Bakersfield, California. And real quick, I know someone's going to key me on this, but there is the Central Coast area also. And I don't want to forget that. That's like San Luis Obispo, that area, all the way up through Monterey.
for all those non-Californians, California's pretty big. So like there's so many different areas that have like their own little subcultures going on. Being born and raised from Bakersfield, like you said, we're closer to the southern tip of the central cities, but so we're a little closer to LA, a little closer to the SoCal scene per se. So when it comes to like the drumming activity, it became very convenient for both of us to eventually go off and march in independent world drum lines for WGI and stuff. So
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how that is. Like, people don't realize like Bakersfield to Los Angeles is probably the same distance from as Riverside is to Los Angeles, just a different direction. If you go, there's the Pacific Mountain Range, which runs north and south through California. There's kind of a break in it, and that's one way to access like the Central Valley from the LA region, and we call that the Grapevine. So if you hear me talk about the Grapevine, it's pretty much like a passway through the mountains to get to the LA area, the Southern California area, through like the Bakersfield Central California area.
we've
So
driven those routes every
many-
weekend
Too many times.
to get
I bet.
to rehearsals and shows. We know that
Yeah.
way too well.
And in the wintertime, if it gets a little cold and it snows up in those mountains, you're gonna be late to rehearsal.
Oh, I could only imagine. Yeah, yeah. I bet like when you guys come down through the Grapevine for rehearsal, you got to make sure you give yourself plenty of time. If not, like a day in advance, and that's crazy. And that's just because of the weather sometimes.
I think also one thing that's kind of funny about the LA area, I remember Efren gave me this advice when I was starting to march RCC, is like leaving Bakersfield like maybe 30 minutes to an hour difference would mean like getting there 3 hours later to RCC, just because of how bad traffic accumulates in LA. So if you leave like at 1 o'clock in Bakersfield, you can make it to RCC at like 4. If you leave at 2 o'clock, you'll make it there at 6.
Yeah.
Just because at that time, LA just becomes a big mess of traffic.
Well, that's like where I live in Rancho Cucamonga, which is somewhat close to RCC, as I am a RCC alum from like the 90s. Back then, you can make go Tigers. Yeah, back then you can make it from where I grew up, which was Ontario, to RCC in about like 20 minutes. But now at any given time, that could be like an hour drive depending on traffic. It's crazy. There used to be a saying called rush hour and non-rush hour, but now here in Southern California, it doesn't seem like there's a non-rush hour anymore. It's just 24/7 rush hour. What is the age difference between the both of you guys?
Yeah, so I was born in '92, and 8 years later, in 2000,
2000. So
this guy came out with a twin. So
you're April, I'm May, so it's pretty close to exactly 8 years.
Yeah. Fun fact: you were born in 1992. That was my first year marching in drum corps. Was 1992. Man, I just felt real old.
I didn't mean to age anybody.
No, it's cool. It's cool. So let's talk about the Bakersfield area of California. A lot of people don't realize that particular city area has produced a lot of pretty phenomenal talent drummer-wise for the activity. Can you give us a little bit of history of the Bakersfield scene, drumming-wise?
So as far back as I know, at least with the people that I've been involved with, there was a handful of individuals kind of going back and forth between Vanguard, Blue Devils, and freelancers in the early '90s. So a few of those names are kind of Mike Eustace, Dave Ellis, Tony Boschini. I'm sure I'm missing a lot of them, but so those are a few heavy hitters that were kind of marching some big name corps. Those guys, along with many others, came and kind of contributed to the community, including notable mention Tim Heasley, horn player. He was marching freelancers. He ended up marching Crossmen. He's actually fast forward, he's a core director at Golden Empire and the director at Bakersfield College as well. So a lot of those guys were very proactive with kind of getting, unfortunately, out of Bakersfield and into these phenomenal ensembles. And then from there, those are a select few people that would come back and really want to see the Bakersfield scene grow. Kind of further background on the Bakersfield scene, it's a very like blue collar kind of lifestyle. Everyone either works in the oil fields or works in the agriculture industry. So you can imagine the economics involved with the family life. So in regards to the arts and marching band, it can get a little rough out here. But the coolest thing, and I think what we're seeing, is a lot of really dedicated people really go for it because they know that it takes a lot to do it. So they really put their heart out on the line and go out and do it. So a lot like those guys that I mentioned were pretty big in the scene. And then in the 2000s, man, there was a lot more people kind of getting involved and getting crazy involved in the drum corps activity. And the Bakersfield scene kept just growing. Notable name in our community was Dave Ellis during the 2000s. He was just coming off of his time with Blast, and he was teaching at Bakersfield High School and a few other high schools around. And Bakersfield High School ended up being like a Dayton-bound group, doing really well in WGI. And from there, a lot of other great talent started coming up. So I guess from my quote unquote era, there's myself, there's Chris Drummer, Manny De Leon, Moses Urena. Like there was a handful of people that were coming from these small like pods of talent that were going out and doing some great things. So it is notable to know that Bakersfield hasn't really had an independent program for until recently. So the talent had to go elsewhere. So that's kind of like where that was going. And then now with some of the growth that we've seen in our community, there's tons more. So kind of fast forwarding to Daniel's generation, like in the early teens, like what are the names that you got? So yourself.
Myself, two others that I know who ended up actually going and marching world class with me, Adam Sanchez, Andres Garza. Well, they were there my rookie year when I marched Golden Empire in 2015, and they also marched in 2014. Then three ended up going on to march Boston with me. So just like it was cool to see that all those people that Efren mentioned from earlier come back and create a program that can help breed members to continue that activity without having to go elsewhere right off the bat. We were able to start that experience here in the city with a quick 10-minute drive to Bakersfield College and start our drum corps careers.
Yeah, it's got to be cool that you know, like early on you don't have to make the long drive. It makes it easier. Like in my era, for the most part, it was like a short drive to different places here in the Southern California area, and by short maybe half an hour to 45 minutes. But now it's kind of crazy to see how far people go to be in the groups that they want, and it's awesome that that opportunity is available. Like let's take Winter Drumline for example. Back in the day, in my day, it wasn't as popular as it is now, and to see what it's come to, it's like you would drum winter stuff just to keep the chops up and drum with your friends to get ready for summer, and then one summer hit, that's where it all is. But now it seems like both are DCI and WGI are kind of equal. There's no one better than the other, and there's some people that just march WGI and don't do DCI, which I find that kind of trippy. Being the older guy than I am, it's trippy, but it's cool. I get it. We can't do it both because it's kind of an expensive activity, and sometimes you got to make that hard choice of doing one or the other. But yeah, like we're talking the Bakersfield area, even in my era, you would have like Bakersfield High School. West Bakersfield was a big group back then. I don't know how they are now. And then even you'd have like groups from the outskirts of Bakersfield, like Arvin High School used to have a pretty good program. So, but the distance from LA to Bakersfield, it's not as far as you would think that it is. But in a lot of people's heads, it's, oh my God, it's Bakersfield. But not, yeah. So do you guys associate Bakersfield with like the SoCal scene, like the Dodgers and Lakers and stuff, or you guys consider yourself like Northern Cal, like the Giants? Yeah.
I would argue that the Venn diagram leans a little more towards the SoCal side. You see more Dodger hats than you see Giants hats, but you definitely see them both. Yeah, I think we associate a little closer to SoCal. Someone in NorCal is gonna send me an angry email about that, but
yeah, but it's trippy because like I consider the cutoff for Southern California Bakersfield. That's it. Bakersfield and everything north is Northern California. And sorry, Fresno. I know Fresno's it's actually its own thing because
we're equal distance to Fresno as we are to LA.
Yeah.
The only thing different is that from here to Fresno are a bunch of fields
and cows,
and from here to LA is our mountains.
Yeah, I have family up there in the Merced area, which is up by Fresno. But we won't talk about Fresno. A lot of people have come from that area, but right now we're focused like on Bakersfield and you guys and the journey you guys have made in the activity. So since Efren is the older brother, let's start with you. How did you get involved in the drumming scene?
Yeah, so it also, I guess, starts here in Bakersfield. I was born and raised here. Around late elementary school, 5th or 6th grade, I picked up concert band, kind of just signed up for it. Didn't really know any better. Mom and dad thought it was a cool thing to get me involved in. It was just kind of like just whatever, just thrown in there. I stayed with it in middle school. And then actually, coincidentally, one of my older cousins, who was just a couple years older than me, he was in the high school drum line. And I was like, oh, cool. I play drums too, kind of. Like I play concert percussion or whatever. And he was like, oh, yeah, like check out my marching snare. And like, I remember he had his drum at home. I was like, whoa, I was pretty blown away by that. So I was like, okay, I think that convinced me to do marching band in high school. So I was like, all right, I'll do that. My freshman year, get in, I make the bass line. I played bass 3 my freshman fall, and just getting moving. And that was a huge humbling experience, like just coming in, kind of not really knowing what I was doing, and just seeing like all these the high school I went to Foothill High School in Bakersfield, California. There's a lot of foothills out there, some that are really good and known in the scene, but unfortunately not this one. Not during my era, at least. But there was still some great talent there. There was some hardworking just individuals that just knew how to grind the gears and make it happen. So I remember going there and just seeing these guys drumming, these seniors just drumming. I was like blown away. And then after that, I remember going straight home from the first day of band camp and just practicing paradiddles until my hands physically hurt. So yeah, that was pretty much my freshman year experience. I eventually, for the winter, ended up making the quad line. So I was like, I was stoked. And then, so that was like my intro into like the drumline scene. And then from there, it kind of just came naturally. So that was the fall of 2006. Our drumline instructor had just came home from marching Fever, Div 3. And he was a pretty young buck. His name's Jared Harris. Shout out to him. He came out just wanting to share all this knowledge that he just came with, and sharing all the videos that he had. That was a little bit before YouTube, so he had a few DVDs and all that, VHSs, and he shared with all of us. I remember early in my freshman year, we had like a rehearsal where we just started the day by watching an hour worth of drum corps and an hour worth of indoor drumline. And my freshman mind was like, what is that? I was blown away. I didn't know it was capable. I was still trying to figure out how to mark time without looking like I pooped my pants. So I was like, what are these people doing on this field right now? This is immaculate. So I was immediately hooked. From then, like, I was just trying to find a way to be involved with it. I knew I wanted to do the marching thing. I was going to do marching band. I was already sold on that. And I was like, how do I get better at this? And how can I move on? So eventually I asked my instructor, I was like, hey, like, I want to audition for something like this. Like, where do I go? And naturally he's like, hey, well, come out to Fever 2007. And I was like, oh, I would love to. And me being a 14-year-old, I asked my parents, I was like, hey, I'm going to Modesto to audition for this drum line. And my parents being, they were pretty disconnected with the activity coming from a different country and all, but they were like, no, absolutely not. So my drum corps dreams immediately got shot down year one. And so that was a little bit of a bummer. But what that allowed me to do is just keep practicing during that whole summer of 2007. And coincidentally enough, early that summer, there was a drum corps show in Bakersfield. I was like, okay, now I can see it live. So that was at Ridgeview High School. It was like early June. Could have even been one of the first few shows. And like Blue Devils were there, Vanguard was there, Pacific Crest, a few other, maybe Academy. Some notable world-class corps were there, along with some great open class or Div 2, Div 3 at the time, like BDB, SCVC, Fever was there, Impulse, some respectable groups. So I immediately bought tickets. I went to that show, had my parents drop me off there. I was like, I'm going with some friends, and I just spent all day watching rehearsal. I think Vanguard was housed there. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to watch Vanguard rehearse all day. So I just watched Vanguard rehearse and watched the show at the end of the day. And the whole day I was just, my head was blown. I was just starstruck.
Oh, I bet.
So I was hooked from there. So immediately when I came home, I was like, Mom, Dad, next year I'm auditioning. And it took a lot of convincing. And even in my later years, I was like, guys, I really want to do this. And so come audition season, that same instructor of mine, Jay, Fever unfortunately folded in 2008. And he was like, hey, I'm auditioning elsewhere. And by that time I was starting to get my skill sets dialed in. I was able to play some stuff around the drums and all this stuff at my school. So I was like, okay, let me challenge myself. And I started learning some audition packets and all that stuff. And funny enough, my first drum corps audition was actually at the Vanguard Cadets joint clinic audition. And I kind of went just because it was like $20 at the time for the whole weekend, which is unheard of now. So it was really affordable. So I was like, yeah, sure, why not? And I went, auditioned. I learned a lot, but I knew I was just seeing the talent for both organizations, the A group and the Cadet Corps. I was like, wow, man, I'm just glad I'm learning and here. So I did that. And
I was going to say, when you saw that A Corps talent, were you like, okay?
I knew going in, I was like, there's going to be some heavy hitters that I just pretty much idolized all last summer. So I'm just excited to be near that action right now, you know? So I soaked in as much as I could. Eventually it came to like really making like audition decisions rather than going to like a clinic thing. And, I buckled down and I was like, all right, I knew a couple people who happened to march BDB the previous year in 2007, a couple of Bakersfield natives. So I was like, all right, let me kind of pick their brains a little bit and see what's up with that scene and all that. And eventually, I caught that bug and I was like, all right, I'm all in. I'm going to learn the BDB packet. I'm going to jump headfirst into that. And coincidentally enough, a few people in my high school did too. So later in that audition season, tried out for BDB. It was a tough audition for me. I was barely hanging on for dear life, but somehow I made it. I made it. So that was my first year in drum corps, 2008, Blue Devils B. And
it's always cool when you get to go with people that you know from your own area, so you're not just like the solo guy there with nobody else there to like talk to or commiserate with. Yeah.
So funny enough is my center snare my freshman year, good friend of mine now, Anthony Cox. He auditioned for the snare line. And he's like, I guess I'll go with you, and he went. And so him, myself, and my instructor at the time, Jay Harris, we made it, and we marched BDB in 2008. And it was three of us from our small little high school, just kind of suiting up and doing the thing. And in those years for BDB, the corps was still relatively small. It was, maybe 40 horns, small drum line, small pit. Guard was like maybe 10, 15. It's not the BDB we know now for sure. But it was.
I was even going to say, like in the 90s, it was a smaller corps, a smaller group with people like learning to try to move up to the A corps. But now you look at BDB and that is its own. Like, yeah, it's a monster. Yeah, I mean, they really have the recipe going down for what it takes to build it, and over the years they've done it where they have a separate standalone, full-on drum corps, very competitive.
So I was lucky enough to kind of be there in the early years of that. I think that those kind of successes for them, at least from the outside perspective, they started really ramping up around the 2006, 2007 area. In 2008, my first year, we were doing well competitively. We were winning all year until finals day. We lost to Vanguard Cadets. Congrats to them. But so yeah, the corps was like, oh, I think we got something. Like things are getting really, really good. And at the time, the corps would only ever go to finals every other year. But because of the trajectory, at least from my understanding, they were like, no, we got to double down on this and go for it. So in 2009, my second year, we went, and I went back. I was super excited, a little more experienced, a little more hair under my chin, and we went and had a great season. So that was BDB's first championship in 2009. So that was another great experience for me. I was still pretty young. So my first year marching, I was 15, turned 16. And then my second year marching, I was 16, turning 17, marching a great open class drum corps with a lot of great talent. And then my third year, I was debating if I should audition elsewhere, blah, blah, blah. And eventually we kind of came down to a consensus, me and a few of us kind of like, this is really good talent. Let's do this again. And we ended up kind of doing some self-recruiting, and 2010 BDB was one of the most talented drum lines I've ever been in. And that's including a lot of my world-class experience too. But yeah, so that was a year that we got Chris Drummer in the quad line. We got another Bakersfield folk, Travis Moody. He came out. So those three of us from Bakersfield just in the quad line, and then two guys from Union City who were from James Logan High School. So it was like this weird little trifecta, like a dynamic going. We had the Bakersfield 3 and then like the Logan 2. So then BDB 2010, that was a blast, man. I wish there was more videos of that. Might need to go dig through a video for that. But so yeah, that was my last year and my third year with the B Corps.
Was Daniel Recorder in that line?
Yeah, so Daniel was my section leader.
Dude, I love his all the jump rope stuff and Dude, the dude is like a workout beast, man. I love his energy and I love everything that he does.
He came in 2009. I was one of the vets, and he came in as a rookie in 2009 and just handled. He was a amazing talent. Funny enough, and I think you won't mind me saying this, but back then he was not in the shape he is now. And that drum corps experience, I think, really changed his life. And he's talked about it openly in in a couple of YouTube videos and stuff. And just watching his transformation is insane. It's really awesome to see. But yeah, he was a motivation for all of us. When he came in as a rookie, I was like, this guy's blowing us all away.
Just watching his stuff on Instagram, his energy seems just so positive. Is he like that in person?
Yeah, he's great. I actually, funny enough, in 2009 and 2010, I housed with him. So I lived with him and his family for those 2 summers. Shout out to the Recorder family for letting me sleep on the couch all summer. He comes, his family is amazing and great hospitality, and you can just tell where his positivity and his attitude comes from, because he comes from a really awesome environment. And yeah. So yeah, that was 2010.
So hold on real quick. Let's back up a little bit. Was there a moment you said, like in high school, you went to your first show, 06? Was there like a video or any particular group you saw live that was like, oh my God, this is what I got to do. This is like my favorite, the hook. What was your hook that got you into all this?
I think I know this.
Actually, I'll let some guess.
I'm pretty sure. I think I know this because, like, during this time I was a little kid. I'm in that, we shared a room together, so anything he listened to was ingrained in my brain because I was a little 6-year-old boy listening to it also. But he was like the biggest fanboy of, was it BD, The Godfather?
Yeah. And let me elaborate on that. So that was my first year knowing what drum corps was, and then BD happened to release that Blue Smoke DVD where it was just about the drum line.
He watched that so much. And
even now, to this day, I watch that, and that quad line is impeccable. It's amazing. So yeah, I remember. So BD 06 was like one of the first, like, oh my God. And then since there wasn't really YouTube out there, I didn't really have anything to discover. But Vic Firth actually had a great like library of content. And one of my favorite things, which I didn't really think much about at the time, was actually the Cadets video. There was a video of them like drumming on a table. There was like, it started with a cool bass lick. They had 6 quads. There was a split snare thing. And I was just like, whoa, it was different vibes for sure. And I was like, man, that was cool. I don't even know what I just watched, and that was awesome. I remember those videos.
Was that the Vic Firth in the Lot series, like on the podcast?
Yeah.
So not even a podcast, on the iPod, the old school iPod. Dude, I remember.
You had to download Adobe Flash or something to watch videos.
I remember I had the original iPod, and it was like the one in black and white. The screen, you couldn't play videos. Then when the video one came out, it's, oh man, you could play videos. And then on iTunes, I happened to stumble across, they put those videos on iTunes, and I started just downloading them and I had a playlist. And like for me, I missed the whole chunk because of just doing work and stuff like that. And, and even like I've told the story before, my wife would be like, hey, drum corps in town, you want to go? And I'm like, nah, it's all right. But I would still watch it online, and I would download these podcasts. And one of the earlier ones, it was probably either 07 or 08. It was the Freelancers, the indoor. And I didn't even know they'd come back indoor. And I'm watching, I was like, wow, this is incredible just to see all that stuff. But, it's cool to hear that the Blue Devils and then that Vic Firth podcast video podcast was very influential for you during your formative years.
Yeah, for sure. So that Blue Devils DVD, for sure, I watched it until it's scratched. And then a lot of Vanguard. There was just a lot of Vanguard influence around where I grew up.
We also had Manny was marching that time.
Yeah,
Manny
so there was a couple Bakersfield natives that were marching at Vanguard. So I was like, oh, like I'm a fan of all this then, You're just kind of naturally just fall into those things. So yeah, those videos I watched on repeat.
Yeah, those Vanguard lines from the 2000s, I've gone back and I've checked them out, and it's like, just the lot content alone is just incredible,
Yeah. Even so everyone thinks about like Vanguard 03 and Vanguard 04, which were phenomenal lines. But like I think some of the underrated lines were the 2 years that Mike Jackson was there in 2006 and 2007, Moto Perpetuo and Eureka, if I'm not mistaken. Those, it was just a really fresh feeling Vanguard. Like looking back at it now, you're like, okay, that's definitely Mike Jackson. And just hearing Mike Jackson's writing, you just can't. There's nothing like it. So seeing that as my first experience was really awesome. And then like kind of hearing more about the history with Murray Gussick and all that stuff, and now like knowing about the history of Vanguard pretty well, it's like, man, some quality groups. But yeah, so I got to watch some of that.
It's interesting to talk about like writing styles, especially like Mike Jackson. I go back and like his first high school lines were like the Mission Viejo, but I'm talking early like 90 and 91. And his writing even back then was very distinct. It was way different than what anybody was doing, and it was super cool. But like even now, you say his writing is just so unique, and it's always fresh, you know.
Yeah, so that was cool, and I got to watch them rehearse in 2007 when they rolled through Bakersfield. So I was like, so I just got to kind of geek out about it, you know, and yeah.
So okay, so we'll flash forward now. So you did BDB from 08, 09, and 2010, correct? And
yeah.
Then 2011. Go ahead. Let's pick back up.
There's an interesting bridge here. So in 2010, my quad tech, we happened to get a new quad tech that year, and it was Ryan Anderson. So Ryan Anderson marched RCC, he marched Carolina Crown, and he was around the scene, and he was teaching at Pulse. So Pulse just had one in 2010. And then straight out of that season, he went and taught BDB, which was just a bunch of us knuckleheads kind of running around. And I think one of those, he was just a huge influence in my marching career. One, I idolized that RCC tenor line that he was in, and he was just a great instructor, along with a lot of other great instructors at BDB. But he was someone that I just immediately latched onto. And as soon as the season for BDB was starting to tail off, I was like, dude, I want to keep drumming like around you. Like I want to be taught by you. So he's like, come out to Pulse. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go out to Pulse. Like I knew nobody in the Pulse organization. I knew a few people, but I didn't know anybody other than Ryan Anderson. And I remember coming home from BDB that summer in 2010, and I was like, all right, I need to just drum all this Pulse stuff now. And that's all I did all fall. I just drummed Pulse stuff. I stayed in contact with Ryan. I made sure I just stayed on top of it. So the winter of 2011 was my first indoor season in WGI, which was with Pulse percussion. So to kind of talk about the WGI scene there, so Pulse was a huge learning experience for me. So I was coming out of like the BDB thing, and that's a whole different approach, different style. And even though Ryan Anderson was the same quad tech, it's a completely different way of functioning.
A different philosophy then, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And not only that, but the talent was through the roof. So we're talking about like me growing up, like watching some of these guys at Vanguard, at Bluecoats, at Phantom and all this stuff. And it's like, oh man, I've always looked up to these guys. And then fast forward to 2011 and I'm marching with all of them. I'm marching with Manny De Leon, Nathan Medina. Like I'm marching with all these center snares from all these world-class drum corps. And I'm just like, I'm on the end of the quad line and I just hope I know I'm in time. So that was my first experience with Pulse. It was a huge humbling experience. I got to meet a lot of people that eventually tied me into a lot of things. But so going to Pulse, I just went by myself. I knew nobody. Eventually I got really good friends with Manny De Leon. So kind of got a little carpool going. And in that funny scenario, I ended up meeting another snare drummer. I remember I was at Pulse and I was like, hey, like we both made it. Like, nice to meet you. And he's like, oh, my name's Mo. I was like, where are you from? He's like, I'm from Bakersfield. I'm riding with you guys. I was like, wait, what? Like, I guess. So I didn't even know who this guy was. So there was a little trifecta there of Bakersfield Pulse crew. So it was Manny De Leon, Moses Urena, and Moises Urena, sorry. And myself. So we had a little carpool going, a little Bakersfield crew. And yeah, man. So that was like my start to WGI. So I was doing the pulse thing. We had a great season. One of the hardest shows I've ever marched. That was awesome.
That was the cell phone show, right? Or
Yeah.
like the cell phones. Dude, I love that show, man. I saw that on video a while back, and I'm like, man, this is like the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, it was still in that era where everything was run and gun. I think the show also kind of lent itself to be taxing and like really hard beats and like all that stuff. It's just showing off.
It looked pretty insane. Like the beats looked crazy.
Yeah, Mates threw everything at us. It was definitely a hard book, but it was really fun.
Yeah, I'll say that's what makes it fun is when the challenge of putting all that together, and if you get to keep your beats without them getting hosed, that's even better.
Yeah, man. So that was a really good season. That was my first WGI season, and I thought we got third overall at the end of the year, but I thought we played really well. Looking back, it's one super clean drum line, cool show. Like it was awesome. So fast forward to my 2011 summer, I actually didn't have anywhere to go. I was contemplating if I should go back to BDB. I auditioned at Bluecoats, and I got a call back. But around this time was like the time where I started going to college. I went to Bakersfield College, and my parents were like, hey, like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing with school, with life? So my parents were, I don't want to say not supportive, but they were proactively kind of like talking me through certain life decisions.
Yeah. Of course, because I've actually, and it's interesting. Through my experience, I've seen people just, and I'm one of them. Back when I drummed, all I wanted to do was drum. That's it. I just wanted to drum. I'm going to go to RCC. I'm taking classes, but guess what classes I'm taking? I'm taking drum classes, and I would throw in some other classes here and there, but I just wanted to drum, But eventually, life catches up with you, and you got to make the smart decisions to be able to have a successful life on top of being able to play drums. And now it seems like, there's opportunities out there to stay in the activity and to do jobs in the activity where before, it was like, okay, you can go teach high school, and you would see guys teaching like 15 high schools just to try to scrape a living by. Yeah.
I know the struggle, but yeah, so I was doing that. My parents were kind of like questioning, because I was already paying for drum corps. I was paying to drive every weekend to LA to do pulse, and like, so I told them, I was like, hey, I got a call back for Bluecoats, so I got to get a plane ticket and go to Ohio in like a couple weeks. And my parents pretty quickly shot me down, like, no, we can't do that.
Were they like, "Donde está Bluecoats?" And then when you had to tell them it was like Ohio, and they were probably like, no.
There's a lot of pretty funny stories on that, but yeah, I mean, my parents, who were born and raised in Mexico, they got married in their late 20s and immigrated to the U.S. So they don't really know this, even marching band. They were so foreign to marching band. So getting deep into the drum corps, they're like, what are you doing? Like, what is this? So I understand their hesitation, and I was already doing pulse. So in their mind, they're like, oh, I thought you were already doing a drum line. I was like, yes. All right, how do I explain this to you? But yeah, eventually I did not go to Bluecoats callbacks, and I didn't have a drum corps. So I marched my whole WGI season with the intention of just not marching my summer. And then late in the spring, probably late April, it was after Dayton, early May, I don't know when it was, I got a call from Eric Shriver, who was a snare tech at Pulse at the time and snare tech at Bluecoats. And he called me. He's like, hey, so I know you're not marching anywhere, and we just had someone drop at Bluecoats. You had a callback anyways, and it just makes sense that we call you first. And funny enough, I was kind of in the mix of jumping back into BDB. Like I didn't go to any auditions, but because I was I would have been my fourth year there. There was some leniency there. So yeah, Eric Shriver called me, and I was like, man, what do I do? Like, I kind of started going towards BDB, but now I'm getting this call to march Bluecoats. So eventually, after some discussions with the instructors and Ryan getting the approval from Ryan Odello, BDB. I went off, and like a week later, flew to Ohio. I think my older sister had to buy me a plane ticket because my parents were like, "Nope, you're not going." I was like, I ran to my older sister. I was like, "Give me some money." And they would go. So yeah, I ended up super last minute marching Bluecoats in 2011.
When did you get there? When did you get to Bluecoats?
I got there day one of spring training, which was awesome, but I missed all the camps. I had to learn most of the show and all the exercises in like a week or two. So I was like, oh man, it was daunting for sure. But the awesome thing about it is there was a few staffers from Pulse who were teaching at Bluecoats at the time. And there was also a lot of members. I think that one year from Pulse 2011 to Bluecoats 2011, there was, I think, 6 or 7 battery members that were from Pulse, and including Austin Rico. Good old band director. So yeah.
It's a small world that you marched and drummed with my daughter's current high school band director. I always that's trippy. And in your guys' younger pictures, you guys look like brothers.
Yeah, we would jokingly call each other brother because we stood right next to each other at Pulse, and then he made Bluecoats. I ended up filling a spot at Bluecoats, and they put me right next to Austin because it made sense. So I got to march. I literally marched right next to Austin from November 2010 all the way till August of 2011. We're 3 feet away from each other every weekend.
It's fascinating to hear now how many people from just everywhere go everywhere. That probably sounds weird, but like from Southern California to the Midwest, or from Northern California to the Midwest, when before, if it was like you went from Southern California to Northern California, that was like a big deal because it's far. But now, it's common, and everybody gets to march wherever they want to march, wherever style they want, whatever instructor they want, whatever corps that's their favorite, they get to actually go and do that. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think drum corps are also, kind of fast forwarding to now, drum corps are doing a pretty good job at like micromanaging their schedules along with their members' schedules. And you see a lot of like virtual camps, even before the unfortunate COVID shutdowns and all that stuff. Like you would see, for example, I know at Bluecoats, they didn't require the battery and the guard to be at a certain amount of camps because they knew you're cranking away on the weekend at all these great drum lines. Like just make sure you know the music and show up when you're ready. And I know a lot of drum corps are kind of doing that. So that's been helping, allowing members just to really explore, which is really awesome.
So back then, how did you guys get like packets if you wanted to audition somewhere? Was it a phone call or an email? I mean,
it was a download. It was like a PDF download or like an email. Like you had to pay, or in some cases, if it was free, it was just like some sort of download that you had to get. Or in other cases, you had to like email someone for them to email you. It was a little clunky. Yeah. In some cases, it was actual hard copies. Like you'd register and then you'd get like a week later
in the mail.
In the mail, like an actual packet, like a booklet.
Yeah, we laugh now, but that was the norm.
Yeah, I remember that's how I got. Like I said, I went to that Vanguard Clinic audition and early going into the 2008 season. And that's how I got that packet. I remember paying the $20 or whatever, and they just shipped it out. A week later, I had a booklet of Vanguard beats.
Picture this in the 90s. If you wanted to march somewhere, you would actually try to track down the number to the corps hall, and you would actually dial it and hope that somebody was there in the office to pick up the phone to give you some information when they're going to have camp and stuff, and what fees you're going to need and stuff. But
now it's all over Facebook.
Yeah, Facebook and Instagram, and
click on a link in their bio, and
yeah, you just click it, and there it's the world is there for you to explore, and you can get lost in that world for a long time. So 2011 you march Bluecoats. You stay in Pulse for 2012, correct? You go back to Pulse because is it all your boys are there? Or?
Actually, funny enough, I was the only quad vet, which was unfortunate. A lot of them just aged out or had life things. I know Austin, for example, I think he was getting a little more serious with school, and he didn't want to march, take away his weekends and all that stuff. So I ended up being one of the only quad vets. And then, but I did have a lot of other great friends there too. For example, Manny was the center snare in 2012. So he was just down the street from me, you know. And then my good friend Mo was also in the snare line again. And then from there, a bunch of other great friends. Like I became really close with Nicole Casino as well, who I marched with at Bluecoats as well. So like a lot of great friends were going back, and I had a great experience at Pulse. So I learned a lot, and I was like, yeah, it makes sense. Why not? So yeah, after Bluecoats 2011, I came back and marched Pulse 2012. Another great year. It was very different than 2011. A little more tasteful, but another really clean drum line. I think we had a whole week with Glenn Crosby in Dayton that he just turned the heat on, and we were cooking by finals night.
Yeah, Glenn is like the monster cleaning stuff, you know.
Oh, dude, yeah. I remember specifically in Pulse 2012, we actually flew out to Dayton a whole week early. So we flew out like Saturday, and then we pretty much just had like a week long just Glenn day. Like it was just Glenn every day, just, you know.
You brought Glenn out to BC in 19, right?
Yeah, so Glenn, so in 2012, Glenn kind of, I mean, we were already doing really well, but then in Dayton we got there and Glenn was there full time, a whole week of just straight Glenn in our ears, just letting us know what we need to know and giving it to us straight. And we by finals we were cooking. So 2012 was really awesome. And yeah, like Daniel said, I've always respected Glenn so much. We actually ended up getting him out to help out at Bakersfield College for a weekend, for a day, I should say, before COVID struck. But so yeah, that was 2012.